state has been in the habit of conducting random audits of files for agents, and my understanding is this happens in a lot of other states as well, where they'll literally knock on your door and say, hello, we're here, and we'd like to see all your files. And frankly, that is a violation of an agent's Fourth Amendment rights against illegal search and seizure, and we believe that to be the case. And so we told them, hey, we're not going to show your files without a warrant or a subpoena or a reasonable cause. And really, the reason why it wasn't that we had anything to hide. I literally was out of town at the time, visiting asset managers, believe it or not.
Okay.
And so I called my attorney up, and I wanted my attorney to handle this audit. And he says, hey, I don't have time. My thought was he would just go to my office and walk him through the files, and he didn't have time to do it that day. And he said, well, just tell him that you're not going to do it. Tell him that they need a warrant. And so we did that, and apparently what we did was we upset the state at some level, and really opened up what turns out to have been a very big can of worms, where they were just absolutely intent on making sure that no one ever tells them no in the future again. And anyway, long story short, then immediately as soon as we said that, they contacted the multiple listing service and asked the multiple listing service for any complaints that have ever been issued against myself or my company or my wife in the 20 years that we've been in business, which was, again, a violation of our civil rights. And so we actually filed a lawsuit at that point against the state of Washington, and we won. And the court found that, in fact, they had violated our civil rights. And, in fact, the judge was very, very aggressive with the attorney from the state of Washington in that hearing and said, look, what you're doing is a violation. It's a civil rights violation. And not only can you not do this to Mr. and Mrs. Hellickson and their business, but unless you plan on changing the Constitution, you can't do this to anybody ever again. And we thought that it had ended there. We thought that ended the problem, and unfortunately it didn't. And in fact, in August of this year, just prior to receiving this notice, we found that another one of my attorney's clients was having the same issue going on, and it turns out that they had not discontinued that practice, and so we went back to court to enforce the court order, and that's when we find that rather than fighting us in court where they'd been losing, the state found it to be easier just to temporarily suspend my license, hoping we can only assume that they would just be able to put us out of business and that we would no longer be the thorn in their side that we had been. And to some extent they were right. They were able to take away literally in the neighborhood of 500 listings and 278 pending transactions, which cost us millions, literally millions and millions of dollars, and also affected our speaking and coaching business at the time as well, which thankfully we have recovered from to some extent. But anyway, long story short, turns out in the very beginning that once we won the initial court case, and we only found this out here in August, in that initial court case, as soon as that was found in our favor, they went out and they hired someone full-time to investigate Michael Hellickson and Tara Hellickson and our business, Hellickson Real Estate.
Wait, the state hired an investigator to investigate you guys full-time after that?
That is correct. And we can only assume that the sole purpose here was to put us out of business. And I say that because literally sometime later, as we've been going through this most recent process, sometime in September, the state's attorney general, the assistant attorney general who's in charge of the case, literally went on TV and said, it is our intent to make sure that Michael and Tara Hellickson never practice real estate in the state of Washington again. This is before there's been a hearing. This is before we've had a chance to respond to the merits of their charges. This is before we've been found guilty of anything, and we still, again, to this day, have not been found guilty of any of their allegations.
Now, this is the state attorney general on television?
On television.
Saying that our goal is to put Michael Hellickson out of business.
That is absolutely correct.
That's unbelievable, man. And at that point, no hearing, nothing had taken place here. And even to this day, you have not been found guilty on a single charge or anything.
That is absolutely correct.
So, Mike, when they suspended your license, at that time you said you had 500 listings and And what was the 275 number? What was that?
It's about just around 278 pending transactions and listings. I mean, we were a very large operation at the time. We had 33 employees and staff members and agents that work for us, and literally overnight. I mean, if you can imagine, on the REO side, our business makeup was about 50% REO and 50% retail and short sale. And so we had a very balanced business. We were doing things just as we needed to. We were on track. In fact, I'd closed over 400 transactions already for the year, and we were on track to close well over 800 transactions for the year, which would have put us definitely in the top 5 or 6 agents in the country for the year. And ultimately the asset managers that were responsible for the assets that we had at the time had no, obviously they pulled those listings from us and reassigned them to other agents. Some even pulled our pending transactions, which technically they're not even supposed to do that. That's a whole other set of issues that has arisen out of all this. But those commissions, once that transaction was written and signed around, those commissions were earned. And so for them to reassign those assets and expect not to pay a commission on those assets was another legal mistake this time on their part. But ultimately, in the end of the day, it cost us literally over $4 million in 24 hours.
Wow. Now, there are a lot of agents listening to this call nationwide, and I know that they're kind of reeling from the numbers you're talking about here. 500 listings, $4 million in commissions, 275 pending transactions, and all of this came to a halt in the day you were suspended.
Exactly, and that's the important thing to know here is they didn't have to be right. They didn't have to be right to destroy our business. All they had to do was issue a temporary suspension pending a hearing, which, by the way, that action of issuing that temporary suspension was found to have been another violation of our civil rights. It was found to be a violation of our right to due process. And by the way, this is a good time to mention, if any agent on this call ever encounters any kind of an issue like this, you need to contact me. Because I really don't want you to have to go through what I've gone through. And the precedent that we have set in this case protects agents nationally. It's not just something that affects agents in Washington State. Because these are civil rights violations that the state has perpetrated, it affects and helps and protects agents all over the country. And there were 3 very distinct civil rights violations they were found to have perpetrated. One was our right to due process. 2 was the right to protect against illegal search and seizure. And 3 was our right and I just lost my train of thought there. The third one was the right to the standard of evidence that was applied. The standard of evidence that the state applied was a simple preponderance of the evidence in our case. And in reality, because real estate licensing is a professional license under the law, it is not a site license like a daycare. It's a professional license like a license to practice medicine or practice law. It's a professional license. And as such, you are entitled to evidence by clear, cogent, and convincing standard of the evidence. Basically what this means, and it doesn't sound like much unless you're an attorney, but to the attorneys it means all the difference in the world. It means instead of you maybe having committed what it is they think you committed, they actually have to prove in a clear, convincing, and cogent manner that you did commit what they are saying that you committed. And that's a very, very big deal for agents nationally.
Well, I know a lot of agents are thinking, man, they didn't realize that they have power. They have control because the DRE can just knock on your door at any time, and you have to let them in and pull files in. It's without notice sometimes. So you have control over that. In your particular case, you took control, and they didn't like it, and as a result of it, they want to make you an example to all agents, at least in the state of Washington.
Well, that's exactly what they're doing. What they're saying to the agents is, don't fight us because we're going to crush you. And, don't assert your civil rights because if you do, we're going to shut you down and we're going to come hard and heavy and we're going to do everything within our power to take you out. In fact, here's another good example of how how hard the state is fighting on this. In Washington State, we have a budget crisis like everyone else. And the state attorney general's office has had a ban on any overtime hours for the Department of Licensing division of their department. And in my case, they have carte blanche authorized as much overtime as necessary to, in essence, put us out of business. And so again, they're willing to spend and do whatever it takes to shut us up and to keep us from being the example to other agents that says, hey, look, you have rights, and you need to protect yourself and your rights. And now, does that mean that we didn't make mistakes? No, certainly. In my career, as I look back at my real estate career of 20 years, I look back, and probably the single biggest mistake I made was not taking care of the relationships with agents in my marketplace and really reaching out to those agents and providing better customer service to the agents in my marketplace. Did I break laws? Did I do anything unethical or illegal? No, that's not what the mistakes that we made. We did everything above board. We crossed our T's, we dotted our I's, and it's true, in fact, that two different state auditors on two separate occasions were so impressed with how well written our files were, and that they were always typed up and never handwritten, and the T's were crossed and I's dotted, that two separate auditors on two separate occasions actually recommended that we teach classes on how to do it, what it is we do.
So Mike, are you saying then that this is more of a witch hunt among agents in your marketplace, of which you did not have a good relationship with? And because you're talking about really, you're saying one of the mistakes is that you didn't really have the kind of goodwill you should have in interacting, reaching out to the agents in your marketplace.
That was a huge mistake on our part. Absolutely. I should have made it a much higher priority in my business to take care of the agents in my marketplace, let them know that we're here for them. Simple things like, answering their phone calls in a timely manner, making sure that, and when I say timely manner, I mean, we would always get back to people same day, but, really picking up the phone when they call instead of letting it go to voicemail and calling them back. Simple things like that would have made such a big difference for us. Instead of having a phone system that is a menu-driven system, having a receptionist that picks up that phone live and helps them and walks them through that process as they pick up the phone. Those are so important things. And, people underestimate the value and the importance of agents in their own marketplace. And what happens is when an agent is out showing houses, and 2 out of the 5 houses they're showing are your listings, and it's next to impossible to show property in a particular neighborhood without showing a Helixson listing, and if their opinion of Helixson is not a positive one, or if they feel like it's going to be challenging or difficult in any way to do business with that company, they build resentment because they know they have to show your properties because you've got most of the property listed. I mean, keep in mind, we had over 500 listings at one point, and that's an awful lot of listings in a small area like the greater Seattle area, and that resentment builds. And if you don't take care of that, if you don't, and some of it's going to happen. Some of it's going to happen just because you're a big producer. And I'll tell you, anybody on this call that's in a major metropolitan area doing over 250 transactions a year probably already knows what I'm talking about. I'm not aware of any very high producers, whether they have a good reputation or a bad reputation. I'm not aware of any good, very, very high producers nationwide that haven't experienced many of the same challenges that we have. And in some cases, bigger challenges on an ongoing basis. But as soon as you hit about that 250 transactions a year mark in a major metropolitan area, you're going to start getting complaints. You're going to start having issues. And I'll tell you, for 18 years, I didn't have complaints in my business. We didn't have challenges. In fact, when this all went down, I still had an A rating at the Better Business Bureau. So, there are, however, things you can do as an agent to avoid a lot of this.
So what can the agents do? I mean, we spoke earlier about the MLS and the disciplinary actions or the complaints. Based on the complaints being made by agents, how does that empower the MLS to take action against you?
It's interesting. The MLS, at least in our case, has been a big challenge from the standpoint that the rules of evidence don't apply, and there's no appeals process outside the MLS. So, in essence, you have a monopoly. In fact, there's argument that there may even be an antitrust case brewing against the multiple